Please Mom, just sign here. Nyumai's voice was as sweet and persuasive as it had been when she was a little girl, begging me for candy money. But now at 35, her hand pressed mine down on the pen as her husband, Dre, held my arm with a grip that ached to my very bones. We were in a bank, amidst the usual bustle of everyday transactions, the ordinary activity a stark contrast to the drama unfolding at our small table. It's just routine, Mom. A small transfer to get some paperwork sorted out. But I knew she was lying. I had seen the documents. It wasn't a small transfer. It was everything. My $50,000 in savings, all that remained after my husband Langston passed away 3 years ago. The bank's air conditioning hummed faintly overhead, yet a wave of hot, suffocating panic washed over me. The fluorescent lights stabbed my eyes, and the rhythmic clatter of the cash counting machines hammered relentlessly in my temples. Nyumai smiled serenely, a performance for the security cameras, as if we were an ordinary family conducting ordinary business. Dre smiled too, but his fingers remained clamped on my arm, a vice-like grip. Come on, Serenity, he whispered into my ear, his breath stale with the scent of cigarettes and cold coffee. Don't make this harder than it has to be. Think of your granddaughter, Imani. Think of everything we've done for you. The irony choked me. I was the one who had paid for Nyumai's college education. I was the one who had provided the down payment for her house. I was the one who had bailed Dre out of debt when he lost his job last year, $20,000 they never repaid. And now they were here, attempting to pilfer the last vestige of my financial security, my widow's pension, the money Langston and I had painstakingly saved over 46 years of marriage. My hands trembled as I held the pen. The black ink seemed so stark, so final against the pristine white paper. One signature and it would all be over. One signature and I would be destitute. Nyumai leaned closer, her sweet perfume mingling with the anxious sweat on my skin. Mom, trust me, it's for your own good. You can't manage this much money at your age. Her words were honeyed poison, each syllable carefully chosen to disarm me. I cast a desperate glance around. The young teller at his window seemed preoccupied with other customers. An older woman patiently waited in line, absorbed in an insurance brochure. A man in a suit was engrossed in his phone. No one noticed. No one saw that I was being robbed in broad daylight. A daylight robbery executed with smiles and feigned affection. Dre tightened his grip on my arm, a choked sob escaping my lips. Shut up, he muttered through a strained smile. We don't want to make a scene, do we? His eyes were glacial, devoid of warmth, and for the first time I fully grasped the chilling truth. This man was capable of anything. Nyumai, my own daughter, the child I had nurtured and raised, sat passively by, watching her husband inflict pain on me without the slightest attempt to intervene. The wall clock displayed 3:15 p.m., a Tuesday afternoon that had transformed into the worst nightmare of my life. I recalled how I had arrived at this horrific juncture. Nyumai had called that morning, her voice laced with feigned urgency. Mom, we need to go to the bank. There are some papers you have to sign. It's important. She hadn't offered any details, never providing specifics, only issuing directives disguised as polite requests. The bank manager, an older gentleman named Mr. Jameson, approached our table with a practiced, professional smile. Everything all right here? Can I help with anything? His presence ignited a flicker of hope within me. This was my opportunity, my sole chance for salvation. My heart pounded so violently, I feared it would burst from my chest. Quickly, I scribbled on a piece of paper. Help! I'm being coerced. I don't want to sign. I folded the note and discreetly slid it to him while Nyumai and Dre were momentarily distracted, reviewing the documents. Mr. Jameson subtly unfolded the note, his eyes widening in comprehension. His professional demeanor shifted, replaced by a look of controlled alarm. For what felt like an eternity, our eyes locked, and in that shared gaze I knew he understood perfectly. Without uttering a single word, he quietly pressed a button beneath his desk, activating the silent alarm. For the first time that afternoon, a sense of calm washed over me. Someone was going to help me. But to fully understand how I had reached this desperate moment, I need to recount the entire story. I need you to understand who I was before I became this woman, silently pleading for assistance in a bustling bank. My name is Serenity Coleman. I am 69 years old. And for my entire life I was the woman who always said yes, the woman who always gave, always helped, and always sacrificed for her family, particularly for Numai. I remember the day she was born as vividly as if it were yesterday. It was a spring morning, and after 12 hours of labor, she finally arrived, small and perfect, inheriting her father's striking green eyes. I cradled her in my arms, promising her she would never want for anything, that she would always have my unwavering love, support, and protection. I kept that promise for 35 years, but now I realize I may have adhered to it a little too diligently. When Numai was 5, her father and I each worked 2 jobs to purchase the pink bicycle she so desperately desired for her birthday. It cost $200, a small fortune for us at the time, but seeing her radiant smile made it all worthwhile. When she turned 15, she yearned to attend a summer camp costing $1,500. I sold my grandmother's cherished jewelry to finance it. When she graduated from high school, she insisted on attending a prestigious private university. "Mom, it's my dream," she pleaded, tears welling in her eyes. "I can't go to a state school. What will my friends think?" The tuition was $40,000 a year, $40,000 we didn't possess. Her father and I secured a loan, using our house as collateral. I worked countless extra shifts at the hospital cafeteria, cleaning tables late into the night, my feet swollen and my back aching. Also, Numai could pursue her college education. She graduated with honors in business administration, and I wept with pride at the ceremony. I believed my maternal duties were fulfilled, that I could finally rest, but Numai had other plans. At 25, she met Dre at a less than reputable bar. He was undeniably handsome, but there was something unsettling about his gaze, a coldness, a calculating intensity that immediately put me on edge. When he introduced himself, his first question wasn't a polite greeting, but an inquiry about whether the house was paid off. I should have recognized this as a glaring red flag. Their wedding cost $50,000. "Mom, I'm only getting married once," Numai implored. "I want it to be perfect." I wanted to object, to explain that we lacked the financial resources, that her father had just been diagnosed with diabetes and we needed to save for his medication, but her happiness, her excitement silenced my objections. We took out another loan. The wedding was undeniably beautiful. Numai radiated in her white lace gown, a vision of storybook elegance. Dre smiled, but I noticed his eyes constantly scanning the wealthier guests, assessing and calculating. After their extravagant honeymoon in Europe, another $5,000 expense we had to cover, Numai and Dre moved into a modest apartment. For 6 months I believed they had finally matured, that they would become self-sufficient. But then the calls began. "Mom, the refrigerator broke. Mom, the car needs repairs. Mom, Dre lost his job and we can't pay the rent." It was always an emergency, always urgent, and I always acquiesced. $500 here, $1,000 there. Small amounts that, cumulatively, eroded my financial security. 2 years into their marriage, Numai announced they wanted to buy a house. "It's an investment, Mom. A step toward the future." The house cost $200,000, requiring a $40,000 down payment. They had no savings, naturally, and their credit was abysmal. "Could you help us, Mom? Just with the down payment. I promise we'll pay you back every penny." That was the most significant promise Numai ever made me, and also the most egregious lie. I withdrew $40,000 from the retirement fund I had diligently built over 20 years. Every dollar represented extra hours worked, meals foregone, clothing I denied myself, vacations I never took, yet I gave it to them. I sat in the bank that day, signing the early withdrawal paperwork with trembling hands as the bank officer explained the penalties I would incur. A 10% penalty for $1,000 loss simply for withdrawing my own money prematurely. "Are you sure about this, ma'am?" the employee asked, his concern genuine. "Once you withdraw these funds, there's no turning back." I assured him I was certain. It was for my daughter, for her future, for providing her with the stability I had never known. I signed the papers and walked to Numai's house with the check in hand, feeling like a hero, believing I was saving the day, enabling my daughter's American dream. Numai wept when I handed her the check, tears of happiness, I assumed. "You're the best mom in the world," she declared, embracing me tightly. "I don't know how to thank you for this. I promise, Mom. I promise I'll pay you back every last cent with interest." Dre also appeared emotional, though his hug felt cold and calculated. "Thanks, Ma," he said. "This means a lot to us." They moved into the house 3 months later. It was beautiful, I have to concede. A 2-story home with 4 bedrooms and a spacious backyard suitable for a pool. Numai invited me to the housewarming party, and I toured each room with immense pride. My sacrifice had been worthwhile. My daughter had her own home. But the calls didn't cease. If anything, they became more frequent. "Mom, we need furniture for the house. We can't live on the floor. $10,000 for a new living room set. Mom, the house needs a new fence. The neighbors are complaining. $3,000 for a wooden fence. Mom, we want to renovate the kitchen. It's so old and the stove doesn't work well. $8,000 for new appliances." Each time I hesitated, each time I mentioned my own expenses, that money didn't grow on trees. Numai knew precisely which buttons to press. "Mom, I thought you'd be happy to see us doing well. I thought you'd want your granddaughter to grow up in a nice house." And so Imani, my 8-year-old granddaughter, the light of my life, became the most potent weapon in Numai's manipulative arsenal. Imani was born when Numai was 27. From the moment I saw her, I knew she was extraordinary. She possessed her grandfather's inquisitive eyes and a smile capable of melting the hardest heart. But more importantly, she possessed a quality her mother had somehow lost along the way: genuine kindness. When Imani visited me, she would bring drawings she had made at school, crayon masterpieces depicting me as a giant grandmother with enormous arms, always smiling. "I made you big because your love is big, Grandma," she would explain in her sweet, innocent voice. It was impossible to refuse anything for Imani. Ballet classes, $200 a month. Piano lessons, $300 a month. Summer camp, $2,500. Special outfits for ballet recitals, $500 per outfit. "Imani has talent, Mom. We can't let her potential go to waste for lack of money." Meanwhile, my own financial situation was rapidly deteriorating. Langston developed complications from his diabetes. His medications cost $400 a month, with insurance covering only a fraction. He required special injections, regular visits to specialists, and a strict diet necessitating more expensive foods. I worked double shifts at the hospital, returning home with bleeding feet, only to cook, clean, and care for my husband. "Why don't you ask Numai for help?" my sister Monique suggested during one of her visits. "You've spent over $100,000 on her in the last 5 years. Surely, she can help with some of the medical expenses." But I couldn't bring myself to ask my daughter for money. It was my duty to care for my family, not the other way around. It was my responsibility to remain strong, to be the unwavering pillar supporting everyone else. Langston passed away early one Tuesday morning, 3 years after his diagnosis. I held his hand as he took his last breath, and I swear I felt half my soul depart with him. We had been married for 46 years. He was my partner, my best friend, my confidant in all the difficult decisions regarding Numai. After his funeral, sitting alone in our empty house, I realized I was utterly broke. The medical expenses, combined with everything I had given Numai, had completely depleted our savings. Langston's life insurance policy provided me with $50,000. It was all I had left to live on for the remainder of my days. I deposited it into a savings account, promising myself I would exercise greater caution, that I would make that money last, that I would learn to say no. But Numai had other plans. 2 months after the funeral, Dre lost his job at a construction company. "It was his racist boss's fault," Numai explained, weeping on the phone. "He fired him for no reason. Now we can't pay the mortgage. Mom, they're going to foreclose on the house. Imani will have to change schools. She'll lose all her friends. They requested $20,000 to stay afloat until Dre found another job. A maximum of 6 months. We'll pay you back with interest. Promise. It was almost half of what I had left, but the thought of Imani losing her home broke my heart. I gave them the money again. Dre found a new job 3 months later, but the money never materialized. When I inquired, there was always an excuse. We're paying off old debts, Mom. We had unexpected expenses with the car. Imani needed to go to the dentist, and insurance didn't cover everything. And now here I was in this bank, watching them attempt to steal the last $30,000 I possessed. My daughter, the child I had raised with so much love, sat beside her abusive husband, smiling for the cameras as they plotted to leave me in abject poverty. Mr. Jameson returned to our table, accompanied by 2 security guards attempting to appear nonchalant, though the tension in their posture was evident. Numai and Dre hadn't noticed anything yet. They were too engrossed in the documents, reviewing the numbers repeatedly like vultures, calculating their spoils. "Excuse me," Mr. Jameson said calmly but firmly. "I need to review some details of this transaction before we proceed." Dre looked up, and for the first time I saw a flicker of nervousness in his eyes. "What kind of details?" "Everything's in order. Mrs. Coleman wants to transfer the money to her daughter's account. It's a family decision." His hand still squeezed my arm, but more discreetly now, aware that other eyes were observing. "I understand," Mr. Jameson replied. "But bank protocol requires me to verify that all parties involved are acting voluntarily, and without external pressure." His words were a bolt of lightning cleaving through the storm of my despair. He looked directly into my eyes. "Mrs. Coleman, would you mind accompanying me to my office for a private verification? It's standard procedure for transactions of this magnitude." Numai immediately stiffened. "That's not necessary, sir. My mother has already decided, haven't you, Mom?" Her smile had become strained, artificial, a mask on the verge of cracking. "We can do everything right here. We don't want to cause you any trouble." But Mr. Jameson was already standing, extending his hand to me. "It's bank policy, ma'am. There are no exceptions." The guards subtly positioned themselves near our table. "It will only take a few minutes." I stood, my legs trembling, and for the first time that afternoon Dre had to release his grip on my arm. Numai grabbed my other hand. "Mom, don't make this difficult. Just sign the papers and let's go home. Imani is waiting for us." She used my granddaughter's name as a master key, attempting to unlock the doors of my resistance. "I'll be right back," I murmured, avoiding her gaze. I knew that if I looked into her eyes, if I saw that innocent expression she had perfected over the years, I might falter, I might give in once more. Mr. Jameson's office was small but inviting, with family photos adorning his desk and a small cactus in the window. He sat opposite me, closing the door. "Mrs. Coleman," he said gently, "tell me what's really going on." And then, like a dam finally breaking, it all poured out. I recounted the years of manipulation, the money I had given without receiving anything in return, the broken promises and the lies wrapped in deceptive sweetness. I described how Dre had hurt my arm, how Numai had used Imani's name to emotionally blackmail me. I explained that those $30,000 were all I had left to live on, that without them I would become homeless. Mr. Jameson listened attentively without interrupting, nodding occasionally, taking notes in his notebook. When I finished, he sighed deeply. "Ma'am, what you're describing is financial coercion, and in some cases elder abuse. What your daughter and son-in-law are doing is illegal." Illegal. The word resonated in my head. All these years I had believed it was my duty, my responsibility as a mother, to give until it hurt. It never occurred to me that Numai's actions had a legal designation, that they constituted a crime. "What can I do?" I asked, my voice cracking. "She's my daughter. I don't want to get her in trouble, but I can't go on like this. I don't have anything left to give." Mr. Jameson leaned forward. First, we're going to cancel this transaction. Second, I'm going to document everything you've told me. Third, I'm going to give you information on legal and protective resources for seniors. He paused. But ma'am, the most important decision is yours to make. Are you ready to say no? Are you ready to set boundaries, even if it means your daughter gets angry? That question struck me like a physical blow. Was I ready? For 69 years, my identity had been defined by my willingness to say yes, my dedication to giving, my self-sacrifice for others. If I ceased to be that person, who would I become? I thought of Langston, of how he had worked tirelessly until the day he died to support our family. I recalled the weeks I had subsisted on beans to pay for Numai's private school. I remembered all the nights I had spent awake calculating expenses, clipping coupons, seeking ways to stretch every dollar. And then I thought of Imani, my 8-year-old granddaughter, growing up witnessing her mother's manipulation of her grandmother. What lessons was she learning? That love could be purchased with money. That it was acceptable to hurt those who loved you to get what you wanted. That older people were resources to be exploited until they were depleted. Yes, I said finally, my voice sounding stronger than I had anticipated. I'm ready. Mr. Jameson smiled and began to write. All right, we're going to start by placing an alert on all your accounts. No one will be able to make transactions without your physical presence and additional identity verification. I'm also going to give you the number for a hotline to report elder abuse. As he worked, I looked out his office window. I could see Numai and Dre in the waiting area. She was pacing nervously, speaking on the phone with agitated gestures. He remained seated, but the tension in his shoulders and the drumming of his fingers on the table were palpable. They knew something had gone wrong. They knew their plan was unraveling. For the first time in years, I didn't feel guilty about disappointing them. Instead, I felt something I hadn't experienced in a long time. Control, power, the ability to make my own decisions without someone dictating my actions or emotions. Mr. Jameson finished writing and handed me several papers. This is a copy of our incident report. This is the number for the helpline. And this, he said, handing me a small card, is my direct extension. If they pressure or threaten you again, call me immediately. I accepted the papers with hands that no longer trembled. What do I do now? How do I explain to them that I'm not going to sign? Tell them the truth, Mr. Jameson replied. That you've decided to keep your money for your own living expenses. You don't have to justify anything else. It's your money, ma'am. You worked for it. You saved it. And you have every right to keep it for yourself. I took a deep breath. It was time to confront my daughter. It was time to become a woman capable of saying no. It was time to start living for myself, even if it meant breaking a lifelong pattern. We walked out of the office together. Numai immediately approached, her face a mixture of anxiety and barely concealed anger. What took so long, Mom? We're going to be late. I looked at my daughter, this 35-year-old woman who had built her entire life on my inability to refuse her anything. And for the first time in decades, I uttered the words that would change everything. I'm not going to sign, Numai. I'm not transferring my money. The ensuing silence was deafening. Numai stared at me as if I had struck her, her green eyes blazing with a mixture of shock and fury I had never witnessed before. Dre rose so abruptly he nearly overturned his chair, his fists clenched at his sides. What do you mean you're not going to sign? Numai asked in a trembling voice, attempting to maintain a false smile for the bank cameras. Mom, we already talked about this. It's just a temporary transfer. It's not temporary, Numai, I replied, my voice unfamiliar to me, firm, decisive, the voice of a woman who had finally discovered her backbone after years of allowing others to bend it to their will. And it's not a transfer. It's my retirement money, and I'm keeping it. Dre took a step closer, but the security guards immediately moved, positioning themselves between us. Serenity, he said in that soft voice he used when he wanted to manipulate me. Don't be ridiculous. What are you going to? What are you going to do with all that money? You don't have any significant expenses. We could invest it far more wisely, make it grow for the entire family. For the entire family, I repeated, a bitter laugh escaping my lips. Just like when you invested the $40,000 for your house down payment, or the $20,000 I gave you when you lost your job. Tell me, Dre, how much of that have you repaid? I saw the carefully constructed mask of concern on his face begin to crumble. His eyes hardened, revealing the calculating coldness that had always been there. A coldness I had been too blind to see. Those were gifts, he muttered through gritted teeth. You said they were gifts. I never said that, I retorted, the words bursting forth like scalding water finally escaping a pressure cooker. You promised you would repay me. You promised it was temporary. You promised a lot of things you never kept. Nyumai began to cry. But these weren't the genuine tears of pain I had witnessed when she was a child and scraped her knee. These were calculated, performative tears. Tears strategically deployed to undermine my resolve. Mom, I can't believe you're doing this to me. After everything we've shared. After all the love we've given each other. Love. The word shot from my mouth like a bullet. You call threatening me love? You call it love when your husband hurts my arm? You call it love when you trick me into coming here to steal everything I own? People in the bank began to turn their heads. An elderly woman waiting in line watched us with evident concern. A young man in a suit stopped scrolling through his phone and stared openly. Nyumai, noticing the attention we were attracting, lowered her voice, but the intensity of her desperation only intensified. Okay, she whispered, wiping away her tears with the back of her hand. Don't transfer everything. Just half. $10,000 is all we need to get out of this jam. What jam, Nyumai? I asked, and I could see the question took her completely by surprise. Dre has a job. You have a house. What precisely constitutes this emergency requiring my retirement savings? She was silent for a moment, and in that silence, I saw the truth I had been avoiding for years. There was no emergency, no genuine crisis. There were simply two adults who had built their lifestyle around my inability to say no. They had consistently spent beyond their means because they knew Mom would always be there to bail them out. Nyumai, I continued, you are 35 years old. Your husband is 38. You both have college degrees I paid for. You both have jobs. It's time for you to learn to live within your own means. What about Imani? Dre asked, playing his strongest card. What about your granddaughter? Are you going to let her suffer because her grandmother suddenly became selfish? That word selfish hit me like a physical blow. All my life I had feared being selfish. I had sacrificed my wants, my needs, my dreams. I wouldn't be selfish. But now, standing in that bank with my last $30,000 about to be pilfered, I realized something fundamental. It wasn't selfish to prioritize my own well-being. It was self-preservation. Imani is not going to suffer, I said firmly. You can continue to provide for her with your own income, just like millions of responsible parents do worldwide. What you can't do is exploit my love for my granddaughter to manipulate me. Mr. Jameson cleared his throat. Mrs. Wilson, Mr. Wilson, you need to leave. Mrs. Coleman has made it abundantly clear that she does not wish to proceed with this transaction, and continuing to pressure her constitutes harassment. She's my mom, Nyumai snapped. I have a right to talk to my mom. Not when you're intimidating her on bank property, Mr. Jameson replied with unwavering authority. The security guards will escort you out. Nyumai looked at me with an expression I had never seen before. It wasn't sadness. It wasn't disappointment. It was pure, unadulterated hatred, the crystallized essence of years of simmering resentment. Fine, Mom, she said in a voice as cold as glacial ice. That's what you want. But don't come crying when you're all alone in that empty house with no one to visit you, with no one to care about you. And don't call when you need help, Dre added. Don't call when you're sick or when you can't manage the stairs. We're not your personal health insurance. Their words were calculated to frighten me, to conjure a vision of a lonely, vulnerable future. And they partially succeeded. I felt a chill of fear run down my spine. What if I did become ill? What if I did need assistance? What if this decision to retain my money cost me my family? But then I remembered something Langston had said shortly before he passed away. We were sitting in the living room watching a television program about scams targeting senior citizens. And he had commented, "Serenity, fear is the most potent weapon manipulators possess. They paint a vivid picture of all the horrors that might befall you if you don't comply with their demands. But the truth is, most of those things never materialize. And if they do, you confront them when they arise, not before." "I understand," I said to Numai, and my voice sounded calmer than I felt inside. "If that's your decision, I accept it. But I'm not going to change mine out of fear of hypothetical future events." The security guards moved closer. "Folks, it's time to go," one of them said with professional firmness. Numai snatched up her purse with sharp, angry movements. "This isn't over, Mom. We'll talk about this at home when you don't have these strangers filling your head with ridiculous notions." "No," I said, and the word came out stronger than I had anticipated. "We are not going to talk about this at home. Not until you're ready to accept my decision without attempting to alter it." They left without a backward glance. Dre with a possessive hand on Numai's back, whispering something in her ear that caused her shoulders to tense further. I watched them walk toward the parking lot through the bank windows. Two figures walking away from my life, taking with them years of insidious manipulation and emotional blackmail. When I could no longer see them, I sat down heavily in one of the chairs in the waiting area. My legs were trembling, not from fear, but from the release of years of pent-up tension. I had done something I never thought I would be capable of. I had said no to my daughter. I had chosen my well-being over her manipulative tactics. Mr. Jameson came over and sat beside me. "How do you feel?" he asked. I thought about it for a moment before answering. "Scared," I admitted, "but also free. As if I can finally breathe after years of holding my breath." The days that followed were the most challenging of my life. Not because I missed Numai and Dre, but because I had to confront the stark reality of who I had been for all those years. I sat in my empty living room, surrounded by family photographs that now seemed to mock me from their gilded frames. And I asked myself questions I had avoided for decades. When had I lost my voice? When had I ceased being Serenity and become simply Numai's mother? The calls began that very night. My phone rang incessantly, Numai's name perpetually displayed on the screen. I didn't answer a single one. On the second day, the text messages started. "Mom, I know you're mad, but we need to talk." "Mom, Imani is asking about you. She's so sad." "Mom, Dre says he's sorry if he hurt you. It wasn't his intention." Each message was a new barb of guilt, attempting to pierce the armor of determination I had painstakingly constructed. On the third day, they showed up at my doorstep. I saw them through the living room window curtains, Numai in a yellow dress, a color I knew was my favorite, Dre with his practiced, insincere smile, and Imani holding hands between them. My granddaughter was carrying a drawing, probably another one of her portraits of the giant grandma with enormous arms. My heart ached to see her, but I didn't open the door. Numai rang the doorbell for a solid 10 minutes, then began knocking. "Mom, I know you're in there. Your car is in the driveway. Please, we just want to talk." Her voice grew increasingly desperate with each plea. "Imani misses you. Look, she made you a drawing." I heard my granddaughter's small voice. "Why won't Grandma open the door, Mommy? Did I do something wrong?" The sound of that innocent question nearly shattered me. I almost ran to open the door. I almost succumbed to the familiar pattern of yielding to emotional manipulation, but I remembered Mr. Jameson's words. Fear and guilt are the most effective tools of manipulators. I moved away from the window and retreated to my bedroom where I couldn't hear them. I put on some classical music on the small radio Langston had given me for our 30th anniversary, and tried to block out the sound of their voices. After an hour, they finally left. That night, my younger sister Monique called me. "Serenity, Numai told me what happened at the bank. She says you've become paranoid, that you think they want to steal from you." Her voice held that condescending tone she often employed when she believed someone was being irrational. "She says they just wanted to help you invest your money better." "Is that what she told you?" I asked, and I could hear the bitterness in my own voice. "Did she also tell you her husband hurt my arm?" Did she tell you I had to surreptitiously pass a note to the bank manager asking for help? Monique was silent for a moment. He really hurt you? He really hurt me? And Nimai saw it and did nothing to stop him. The words flowed more easily now, as if each utterance made them more real, more valid. Monique, they've taken over $100,000 from me in the last 10 years. They've never repaid a single cent, and now they wanted the last $30,000 I have left. But Serenity, Monique said gently, she's your daughter. Families help each other out. Families do help each other out, I agreed. But this wasn't help. This was exploitation. There's a significant difference between occasional assistance and being treated like a personal ATM. After hanging up with my sister, I realized that even the people who loved me didn't fully comprehend what I had endured. They had witnessed the money transfers, but they hadn't seen the emotional manipulation. They had seen the generous gifts, but they hadn't seen the veiled threats. When I hesitated, it was nearly impossible to explain years of subtle abuse to someone who had only observed the surface. On the fourth day, Imani showed up at my door alone. My heart stopped when I saw her through the window, in her school uniform and with her pink backpack, standing on my porch as if nothing had changed. This time I opened the door because I knew an 8-year-old girl wasn't responsible for her parents' manipulative behavior. "Hi, Grandma," she said with that smile that could illuminate entire cities. "Mommy says you're mad at us, but I didn't do anything wrong, did I?" I knelt down to her level, swallowing the tears that threatened to spill over. "No, my love, you didn't do anything wrong. Grandma isn't mad at you. Then why haven't you come to visit? Why don't you answer the phone when Mommy calls from home?" Her green eyes, so much like Nimai's, but filled with genuine innocence, regarded me with confusion. "Imani," I said, choosing my words carefully, "sometimes adults have disagreements they need to resolve, but that doesn't mean Grandma doesn't love you. I will always love you no matter what. Can I come in? I made you a new drawing." She held up a sheet of paper she had been clutching to her chest. I let her in, and we sat in the living room while she explained her drawing. It was like all the others. I was a giant figure with enormous arms, but this time something was different. Instead of smiling, the grandma in the drawing looked sad. "Why is Grandma sad in your drawing?" I asked her. "Because Mommy says you're sad. She says some bad men at the bank told you things that confused you." Imani looked at me with those serious eyes that seemed too old for her face. "Is it true there are bad men, Grandma?" I realized Nimai had already begun to construct her version of events, portraying me as a confused victim manipulated by strangers. It was clever, I had to admit. By relaying this narrative to Imani, she not only controlled the story, but also laid the groundwork for future manipulative attempts. "There are no bad men, Imani," I said firmly. "The men at the bank are good. They helped me when I needed help. But then why does Mommy say?" I interrupted gently, "Sometimes adults see the same things differently. Like when you and your friend look at a cloud and you say it looks like a cat, but she says it looks like a dog. You're both seeing the same cloud, but you interpret it differently." Imani nodded solemnly, as if that explanation made perfect sense. We spent an hour coloring together, and for a moment I could pretend that nothing had changed. But when it was time for her to go, because I knew Nimai would come to pick her up soon, Imani asked me a question that broke my heart. "Grandma, you're not going to give me money for my ballet classes anymore?" There it was. Even at 8 years old, Imani had already learned to equate my love with my money. She had already internalized the lesson Nimai had taught her, that Grandma was valuable for what she could provide, not for who she was. "Imani," I said, kneeling down to her level again, "do you love me because I give you money? Or do you love me because I'm your grandma?" She looked confused by the question. "I love you because you're my grandma, but money is good too. Mommy says that's why you're the best grandma in the world, because you always help us when we need things." In that moment, I understood the profound damage I had inflicted with my years of limitless generosity. I had not only enabled Nimai's financial dependence and emotional manipulation, I had also taught my granddaughter that love was expressed through monetary transactions, that family relationships had a transactional component. "Imani," I said, "I want you to know something very important. I love you for who you are, not for what I can give you, and true love cannot be bought with money." Do you understand? She nodded, but I could see in her eyes that the answer was more rote than genuine. She was too young to fully grasp the concept, especially when her entire life's experience had taught her the opposite. When Yumai arrived to pick up Imani, she didn't get out of the car. She just honked from the driveway as if I were a stranger observing her child. Imani ran to the car, waved goodbye, and disappeared behind the vehicle's tinted windows. That night, sitting alone in my living room, I realized I had lost more than my money over the years. I had lost my identity, my voice, and my ability to form authentic relationships. But I also realized something else. For the first time in decades, I had the opportunity to reclaim all of it. All of it. A week after the incident at the bank, when I had already begun to acclimate to the strange silence of my house without Nyumai's constant calls, I received an unexpected visitor. It was a Sunday afternoon, and I was tending to the garden plants that Langston had cultivated with such dedication when I heard the doorbell. Through the peephole I saw a young woman I didn't immediately recognize. She was tall, with brown hair pulled back in a ponytail, and she had a nervous smile that seemed vaguely familiar. When I opened the door, I realized it was Imani, but not the 8-year-old Imani who had visited a few days earlier. This was an 18-year-old Imani, a version of my granddaughter that existed only in my imagination of what she would become. But the confusion lasted only a second, because then the young woman spoke. "Mrs. Coleman, I'm Imani, but not your granddaughter Imani. I'm your great-niece, the daughter of Arthur, your sister Monique's son." Her voice was soft but resolute. "I know we don't know each other well, but I needed to come talk to you." Arthur? The name evoked vague memories of a nephew I had seen at family gatherings as a child, but who had lost contact with our family when he moved north for work. "Please come in," I said, stepping aside. "Would you like some tea?" We sat in the living room, and this other Imani explained her reason for visiting. "My dad told me what happened at the bank. Aunt Monique told him the whole story, and he asked me to come talk to you." She paused, as if carefully selecting her words. "You see, Mrs. Coleman, I went through something very similar with my own mother." She recounted her story while the tea cooled in our cups. Her mother, Arthur's ex-wife, had developed a gambling addiction after their divorce. For years, she had manipulated Imani into giving her money from her part-time jobs, money from her college savings. She had even forged Imani's signature on several student loans. "It was always an emergency," Imani explained. "It was always the last time. She always promised she would pay me back, that she just needed a little more time." "And what did you do?" I asked, although I already suspected the answer. "At first, nothing. She was my mother. I was supposed to love her unconditionally, right? Good daughters were supposed to help their mothers." Her voice held a bitter edge I recognized instantly. But then I realized it wasn't love she was asking for. It was survival. Her survival at my expense. She described how she had had to sever all contact with her mother for 2 years, how she had had to learn to ignore the desperate calls, the guilt-inducing messages, the suicide threats that proved to be empty manipulations. "It was the hardest thing I've ever done in my life," she admitted. "But it was also what saved me." And now I asked, "How is your relationship with her?" "Better," Imani replied with a small but genuine smile. "But only because I established firm boundaries and refused to compromise them. We have a relationship now, but it's an honest relationship. She knows she can't ask me for money. She knows if she lies or manipulates, I'll disappear again." And surprisingly, when we removed money from the equation, we discovered that there was real love beneath all the dysfunction. Her words offered something I hadn't felt since the bank incident. "Hope. Do you think it's possible?" I asked. "Do you think Nyumai and I could have a genuine relationship someday?" "I don't know," Imani answered honestly. "It depends on whether she's willing to change. But what I do know is that you have to be willing to maintain your boundaries, no matter how painful it may be." She told me about a support group that met at the downtown library every Tuesday evening. "It's for people who have experienced financial abuse from family members," she explained. First, I thought it was absurd. I didn't consider myself a victim of abuse, but when I attended, I realized there were dozens of people just like me. Parents, grandparents, siblings, all of whom had been manipulated by family members who knew precisely which buttons to push. Before she left, Imani gave me a long warm hug. "Mrs. Coleman, what you did at that bank was incredibly brave. Don't let anyone make you feel guilty for prioritizing your own well-being." That week passed quickly. For the first time in years, I began doing things solely for myself. I read books I had longed to read for decades but had never found the time for. I walked in the park where Langston and I used to stroll on Sunday mornings. I cooked meals I enjoyed, not the ones I knew Nyumai preferred when she visited. On Tuesday evening, I decided to attend the support group. The library was quiet, and in a small room at the back, I found 12 people sitting in a circle. There were men and women of all ages, but most were over 50. The facilitator, a woman named Sandra, greeted me warmly and told me to introduce myself only if I felt comfortable doing so. I listened to story after story that resonated deeply with my own. A 70-year-old woman whose son had stolen $100,000 by forging checks. A 60-year-old man who had remortgaged his house 3 times to cover his brother's gambling debts. When it was my turn to speak, the words poured out like a river finally reaching the sea. I told them about Nyumai, about the years of manipulation, about the incident at the bank. I anticipated judgment. I expected them to tell me I had been foolish or naive. Instead, I found understanding. I found validation. I found people who had lived through precisely the same ordeal. Financial abuse by family members is one of the most difficult types of abuse to recognize. Sandra explained after I finished, because it's cloaked in love, in family obligation, and guilt. The abusers know exactly what to say to make us feel like we're the ones being unreasonable. A woman named Eleanor, who had been in the group for 2 years, offered me the most valuable advice. "Serenity, you are going to doubt your decision 1,000 times. You're going to question whether you were too harsh, if you overreacted, if you should simply call your daughter and apologize. Those moments of doubt are normal. But every time you feel that doubt, remember how you felt in that bank. Remember the fear, the physical pain, the desperation. Those feelings don't lie." When I got home that night, there were 3 voicemails from Nyumai on my answering machine. I listened to them, and for the first time, I could hear the manipulation clearly, as if someone had meticulously cleaned my ears after years of accumulated wax. "Mom, Imani asks about you every day. She's depressed. She doesn't understand why her grandma doesn't want to see her. Mom, Dre and I have been talking and we think you should see a doctor. This behavior isn't normal for you. Mom, I'm starting to think maybe you're having memory problems. Have you considered you might be developing dementia?" Each message was a new tactic. First, use Imani as an emotional shield. Second, invalidate my ability to make rational decisions. Third, suggest that I had cognitive impairments. It was a textbook example of psychological manipulation, executed with surgical precision. I deleted the messages, without calling her back. The following day, as I prepared breakfast, the telephone rang. An unfamiliar number flashed on the screen, so I answered, assuming it was something important. It was my granddaughter Imani, my 8-year-old, the real Imani. My daughter, Nyumai, had borrowed her work phone to call me. "Grandma," Imani said, "Mommy says you don't answer when we call from home anymore." My heart pounded. "Hello, my love. How are you?" "I'm good, but I miss you a lot. When are you going to come visit us? When are we going to go to the park together like we used to?" Her small voice held a palpable sadness, and my resolve faltered. "Imani," I said carefully, "Grandma loves you very much, but right now your mom and I have some grown-up problems we need to work out. But are you going to work out the problems soon? Because my birthday is in 2 months and I wanted to ask you for something special." There it was again, the expectation that I would provide a gift. "What did you want to ask me for, my love?" I asked gently. "I wanted to ask if you can help me buy a new dress for my ballet recital. Mommy says it costs $200 and they don't have the money this month." And there was the true reason for the call. Nyumai had used her 8-year-old daughter as an intermediary to solicit money, using this innocent child to do her dirty work. In that moment, phone in hand, I knew this conflict was far from over. "Imani," I said to my granddaughter, my heart aching but my voice firm, "let me talk to your mom. There was a pause, then I heard Nyumai in the background. Give the phone to mommy, my love. When Nyumai took the phone, her voice had changed. Gone was the hysterical desperation of previous days. It was calculated, cold, as if she'd meticulously planned her approach. Hello, Mom. Imani wanted to call you because she misses you so much. She's been so sad since you decided to cut us out of your life. Each word dripped with veiled accusation. Nyumai, I interrupted, you know perfectly well that I haven't cut Imani out of my life. I've set boundaries with you and with Dre. Imani can visit me whenever she wants, but you are not going to use my love for her to manipulate me. Manipulate you? Her voice rose sharply, feigning outrage. Mom, Imani needs a dress for her recital. It's a normal thing any grandma would want to do for her granddaughter. I don't understand when helping your own family became manipulation. It became manipulation, I replied, my clarity surprising even myself, when you started using your 8-year-old daughter as a messenger to ask for money after I clearly told you I wasn't going to continue funding your lifestyle. A long silence followed. When Nyumai finally spoke, her mask of worried motherhood crumbled. You know what, Mom? You're right. Yes, I told Imani to ask you for money for the dress. And you know why? Because you have always been the grandma who gives gifts. You've always been the one who makes special things possible. And now, out of nowhere, you've decided you don't want to be that person anymore. How am I supposed to explain that to a child? You explain to her, I said, feeling a new strength surge through me, that grandmas can love without giving money. You explain that healthy families don't condition their love on financial transactions. You explain that you, her parents, are responsible for covering her needs. Her needs. Nyumai laughed, a bitter, resentful sound. Mom, we live paycheck to paycheck. Dre earns enough to cover the basics, but the extra things, the things that make Imani's childhood special, have always depended on you, and you knew it. You liked being the hero, the savior, the one who made dreams possible. Her words stung, for a kernel of truth resided within them. For years I'd found my purpose, my self-worth, in solving their financial problems. I'd felt a sense of pride when Nyumai introduced me to her friends, saying, my mom is always there for us. I had enjoyed the role of the generous, successful matriarch who could resolve any crisis with a check. You're right, I admitted, sensing Nyumai's surprise. I liked being the hero. I liked feeling like I was needed, that I was valuable to you. But Nyumai, do you realize what that did to both of us? It turned you into someone who can't solve her own problems without begging for money. And it turned me into someone who didn't feel loved unless I was giving. Don't say that, Nyumai murmured, but her conviction faltered. It's the truth, my daughter. And the worst part is we're teaching the same thing to Imani. She's growing up thinking that family love comes with a price, that relationships are maintained through financial transactions. Another silence. Then Nyumai said something that broke my heart. So what am I supposed to do now, Mom? How am I going to pay for the dress? How am I going to explain to Imani that she can't be in the recital because we don't have the money? For the first time, I heard genuine vulnerability, not manipulation, the genuine fear of a mother struggling to meet her daughter's expectations. I understood then that Nyumai wasn't just a calculating manipulator. She was a woman with a profound financial dependency, unable to function without my support. Nyumai, I said gently, have you considered talking to the ballet school? They often have assistance programs or used costumes they can lend. Have you thought about selling some things you don't use anymore? Have you looked into part-time job options? It's not that easy, Mom. It's not that easy. I agree. It's not easy, but it's possible. Millions of families solve these kinds of problems every day without asking their aging parents for money. But you're not just any aging parent, Nyumai protested. You have money. You have the means to help us. Why is it so terrible that we want a little help? Because it's not a little help, Nyumai. In the last 10 years you've asked me for over $100,000, and you've never paid back a single cent. And because the help comes with manipulation, lies, and now even physical violence. Dre didn't mean to hurt you. He was just nervous. That's all. Dre grabbed my arm so hard he left bruises. And you saw it and did nothing to stop him. The memory of that moment in the bank returned with searing clarity. Her husband had been willing to physically hurt me to get my money, and she had condoned it. Her silence was agreement. Her inaction was complicity. The conversation continued for another 20 minutes, but it felt like we were speaking different languages. Nyumai perceived my boundaries as selfishness. I saw her persistence as abuse. She viewed my years of generosity as justification for continued support. I saw it as evidence of a toxic dynamic I'd allowed to fester. When we finally hung up, unresolved, I sat in my kitchen feeling a mixture of sadness and relief. Sadness because I realized our relationship might be beyond repair without fundamental change, and relief because, for the first time, I'd articulated my feelings without succumbing to guilt or manipulation. That afternoon I did something I hadn't done in years. I went for a solo walk downtown. I browsed stores I'd always wanted to visit but never had the time. I visited a bookstore and bought 3 novels recommended by my support group. I stopped at a coffee shop and ordered an expensive dessert, simply because I felt like it. As I savored that chocolate cake unburdened by the cost, I had a revelation. I could spend money on myself without guilt. I could make my own life decisions without seeking permission or justification. For the first time in decades, I felt free. That night, while reading one of my new novels, the phone rang. It was an unfamiliar number, so I let it go to voicemail. Then I heard a voice that made me rush to answer. "Grandma, it's Imani, the big Imani, your great niece. I wanted to ask you how the support group went. And I also wanted to invite you to dinner on Saturday. My dad is cooking and I think he would like to get to know you better." For the first time in weeks, I smiled genuinely. I had lost a toxic relationship with my daughter, but gained something I hadn't known existed. An authentic connection with family who valued me for who I was, not for what I could give. "I would love that," I replied. And as I said it, I felt a new version of myself beginning to bloom. 6 months after the incident at the bank, I awoke in a room I didn't recognize at first. The curtains were different. The light fell at a different angle. The air smelled of jasmine, not the stale scent of sadness that had permeated my house for so many years. Then I remembered. I was in Tuscany, in a small bed and breakfast I'd booked for a 2-week trip to Italy, my first solo international trip, paid for entirely by myself, without asking anyone's permission. The trip had been Imani's idea, my great niece, who had become a constant, healing presence in my new life. "Mrs. Coleman," she had said during one of our weekly dinners, "you've spent 69 years living for others. It's time for you to live for yourself." She'd shown me photos of quaint Italian towns, flower-filled markets, and vineyards stretching to the horizon. "Wouldn't you like to see the world with your own eyes?" Initially, the idea seemed preposterous. Women like me didn't travel alone in Europe. Women like me stayed home, caring for others, passively awaiting life's generosity, rather than actively creating it. But then I recalled something from the support group. Limiting beliefs are self-imposed chains. So I booked the trip. I obtained a passport for the first time. I bought new luggage and comfortable walking shoes. And when Yumai found out, she called furious. "You're spending your retirement money on a trip to Europe?" She shrieked. "Mom, that money should be for emergencies. What if you get sick? What if you need expensive medical care?" "Yumai," I replied, my calmness surprising even myself, "I have health insurance. I have enough savings for any real emergency. And after 40 years of working and saving, I deserve to spend some money on my own happiness. What about us? What if we need help while you're on vacation? Then you'll do what any functional adult does. You'll solve your own problems." I hung up without further discussion, feeling no guilt for the first time. Now, sitting on the bed and breakfast terrace with an authentic Italian coffee and a cornetto, I recalled that conversation and smiled. A verdant valley stretched before me, dotted with ancient olive trees. In the distance, I saw other travelers beginning their morning walks, young couples, families, and several women my age, all radiating freedom. My phone vibrated with a text message. For a moment my heart pounded. Was it Nyumai, with a contrived family emergency to guilt me for being away? But it was Imani, the older one. "How's the Italian adventure? I want to see photos," she wrote, followed by several heart emojis. I sent her a photo and wrote, It's more beautiful than I imagined. I feel like a completely new person. You know what? I don't think you're a new person. I think you're finally being the person you always were, but never allowed yourself to be. Her words sparked profound contemplation, prompting me to walk to the village to process them. As I strolled through the cobblestone streets, I reflected on the past few months. After confronting Nyumai, I'd expected to feel empty, purposeless. For so many years, my identity had revolved around being needed, the problem solver, indispensable to my family. But instead of emptiness, I found space to discover that I enjoyed not worrying about pleasing others. Space to forge new friendships with people who valued me for my intellect and humor, not my financial resources. Space to explore dormant aspects of myself. In the support group, I'd met Eleanor, a 75-year-old woman who'd experienced similar challenges with her drug-addicted son. We became friends and enrolled in painting classes at the community center. I discovered a talent for landscapes, something I would never have known if I'd continued devoting all my free time and money to Nyumai's problems. I also volunteered at a shelter for victims of domestic violence, where I met women rebuilding their lives after toxic relationships. The work was emotionally challenging but deeply rewarding. For the first time, I was helping others from a place of strength, not codependency. Most surprisingly, my finances were better than ever. Without Nyumai and Dre's constant demands, I'd created a substantial emergency fund, invested some savings, and afforded small luxuries like this trip without financial anxiety. While shopping for dinner ingredients, I received an unexpected call. It was Mr. Jameson, the bank manager who'd helped me on that dreadful day that now seemed like a distant past. "Mrs. Coleman," he said warmly, "I hope you don't mind me calling you on your vacation. I got your number through Imani, your great niece, because I had some news I thought you'd want to hear." My heart pounded. What kind of news? Nyumai and Dre came to the bank last week. They tried to access a joint account they apparently had with you for several years. An account they didn't know we had placed alerts on after the incident. I didn't know what account he was referring to, but asked him to continue. "It seems 3 years ago, when you were caring for your sick husband, Nyumai convinced you to add her name to one of your savings accounts in case of an emergency. Do you remember that?" I vaguely remembered signing papers during the chaotic days after Langston's diagnosis, when Nyumai had insisted on helping me manage my finances. At the time, I trusted her implicitly. "The account had $12,000, Mr. Jameson continued. They tried to withdraw everything, but our system automatically stopped them and called me. When I explained that they couldn't make transactions without your presence and explicit authorization, they became very aggressive. We had to call security." $12,000. Money I'd forgotten existed. Money Nyumai had been waiting to seize. That day at the bank hadn't been their first attempt to rob me. It had simply been their most desperate. "What did we do with the account?" I asked. "We transferred it completely to your name and removed all other authorized signatories. The money is safe." After hanging up, I sat on my terrace, watching the sunset paint the sky in hues of orange and pink. $12,000 more dollars. Money I could use for more trips, art classes, charitable donations. Money I could enjoy without guilt, because I finally understood a fundamental truth. I deserved to spend it on my own happiness. The next day, my last in Tuscany, I sat in a small cafe with my journal, a practice I'd started at the support group's suggestion. In its pages, I wrote the words that marked the end of one era and the beginning of another. Today, I don't need permission to live. I don't need to justify my happiness or apologize for taking care of myself. I spent 69 years paying to be loved, but I have discovered that true love is priceless, and more importantly, I have learned to love myself. I closed the journal and looked around. Sunlight bathed the ancient stones. Tourists laughed in unfamiliar languages. And I was exactly where I wanted to be, free, at peace, finally living for myself. It wasn't revenge, it was liberation. 2 years after my trip to Italy, I awoke in a house I didn't recognize at first. A small cottage with a garden, purchased in a quiet neighborhood across town. I'd sold the old house where I'd lived with Langston for 40 years, 6 months after returning from Europe. It was filled with too many memories, Too many shadows of the woman I used to be. This new house was entirely mine, chosen and decorated to my liking, free from the ghosts of the past. It was a Saturday morning. I was making coffee when I heard the doorbell. Through the window, I saw a familiar figure on my porch, Imani, but not the 10-year-old from my memories. She was taller, thinner, clearly grown in these 2 years. My granddaughter was 11, and seeing her alone made my heart leap. I opened the door slowly. "Hi, Grandma," she said, her voice sounding more mature than I remembered. "Can I come in? I have something important to tell you." I let her in, trying to manage the mix of joy and anxiety. "How did you find me, my love? Do your parents know you're here?" "Aunt Monique gave me your address," Imani replied, settling onto my sofa as if she were a regular visitor. "And no, Mommy doesn't know I'm here." I told her I was going to my friend Maria's house. She looked different, taller. Yes, but there was also a new seriousness in her eyes, a determination that painfully mirrored my own recent evolution. "Imani," I said, sitting opposite her, "tell me what's going on." "Grandma, I need to ask you something, and I want you to tell me the truth." Her green eyes held an intensity that surprised me. "Is it true that Mommy and Daddy tried to steal money from you at the bank?" The question struck me like a blow. For 2 years I'd anticipated this moment, mentally rehearsing my response. But with her direct gaze, all my prepared words vanished. "Who told you that?" I asked, gaining time. "No one told me directly," Imani replied, "but I've been listening for 2 years. I've been listening to the fights, the phone conversations, the comments they think I don't understand." She paused. "And I also found some of the letters you wrote me." Mommy had hidden them in her closet. My letters? I'd written religiously for 2 years, one each month, explaining my love for her, assuring her that the adults' problems weren't her fault. I'd never known if Numai had given them to her. "What did the letters say, Imani?" "They said you loved me. They said it wasn't my fault we didn't see each other. They said you hoped that someday we could be together again." Her voice cracked slightly. "Why did Mommy lie to me? Why did she tell me you didn't care about our family anymore?" I took a deep breath. It was the moment of truth. The moment I both feared and awaited. "Imani, your mom and I had some very serious problems about money. Adult problems that were very difficult to solve. But is it true they tried to take all your money?" She looked me in the eyes and I made a decision. Imani was 11, but she'd lived through this her whole life. She deserved an honest answer, age appropriate but honest. "Yes, my love, it's true." She nodded slowly, as if that confirmation completed a puzzle she'd been assembling for years. "That's why you don't live in the old house anymore. That's why you don't give us money for special things anymore. That's why Mommy always gets sad and angry when someone mentions your name. How do you feel knowing this?" I asked gently. Imani considered for a moment. Confused, she finally admitted, "Because I love Mommy and Daddy, but I also know what they did was wrong. And it makes me sad that you've been all alone this whole time." "I haven't been alone, Imani," I said. And it was true. I've been learning to take care of myself and I've made new friends. In fact, I've been happier in these last 2 years than I had been in a long time. I told her about my painting classes, my volunteer work, my new friendships. I showed her some of my paintings, and her eyes lit up as she recognized some of the landscapes from photographs she'd seen online. "Grandma," she said after a while, "I want you to know that when I'm 18 and can make my own decisions, I want to have a relationship with you. A real relationship, not like before." "What do you mean, not like before?" I asked. Before, when she came to visit, there was always an undercurrent of something strange, as if my daughter wanted her to ask me for things, or as if the visit served a purpose she couldn't quite grasp. Imani spoke with a wisdom beyond her years, a wisdom that genuinely broke my heart. "I want to visit you simply because I enjoy your company," she explained. "I want to get to know the real you, not just the grandma who gives presents." We hugged for a long time. In that embrace, I felt a surge of genuine hope for the future of our relationship, a feeling I hadn't experienced in years. Imani stayed for 2 more hours. We strolled through my new garden. I showed her the flowers I'd planted and the herbs I was cultivating. We baked cookies together, and as we mixed the dough, she shared stories about school, her burgeoning interests, and the book she was currently reading. When it was time for her to leave, she gave me another warm, tight hug. "Grandma, can I ask you a favor?" she asked. "Of course, my love," I replied. "Can you keep writing me letters? But now that you know where I live, you can send them directly to me. You can send them to Maria's house, and she'll give them to me." I promised her I would. I watched her ride away on her bicycle, pedaling resolutely toward her complex life, yet carrying a newfound understanding of the truth. That night, sitting in my garden with a cup of tea and my journal, I wrote, "Today my granddaughter found me. Not the manipulated child I knew before, but a brave young woman who actively sought the truth. In her I see hope that genuine love can endure deception, that authentic relationships can thrive even after years of emotional toxicity." I closed my journal and gazed at the stars. For the first time in my life, the future felt brimming with possibilities, not constrained by obligations. I was 71 years old and I was finally learning how to truly live. A profound sense of peace settled over me. As Serenity's voice echoed in the bank, a hush seemed to fall over the crowd. The tension was thick enough to choke on, the air vibrating with the weight of betrayal and defiance. For the first time, Dre's mask of control cracked, his rage slipping into the open like a storm breaking loose. But Serenity stood taller, her eyes blazing with a strength long buried, declaring she would no longer be their victim. The silent alarm had already been triggered, but it was her words, unyielding, unafraid, that changed everything.